Thank you for joining us today. I'm Liz Horton, Senior Vice President of the Greenville Chamber. We host these Community Matters discussions on the second and fourth Tuesday of each month to connect you with local, state, and national leaders. You can find past recordings as well as the upcoming schedule at www.greenvillechamber.org. Just a few couple housekeeping notes. All attendees should be on mute with cameras turned off, at least for the time being. And we'd like to encourage you to submit any questions that you may have as we go through into the chat feature. Today, I'm speaking with Lucy Henry, Vice President of Stakeholder Relations for First Sun EAP. Lucy began her EAP career in 1992 after completing a Master of Divinity and a Clinical Pastoral Education residency. While working with the Spartanburg Alcohol and Drug Abuse Commission's EAP, Lucy pursued a counseling degree and clinical licensure. In 2000, she joined the First Sun EAP team, and it's a champion in the EAP industry. Welcome, Lucy.
Thank you, Liz. I'm just so delighted to be here with you today.
Thank you.
Appreciate the Greenville Chamber and all that they do.
Thank you. Would you help get us started this morning by identifying what constitutes mental health?
Yes, most definitely. And as many of you may know, May is Mental Health Awareness Month. And, we are certainly focusing much more on mental health these days because of the pandemic. But when you think about mental health is really a component, of overall well-being, and it constitutes emotional, psychological, and social well-being. But it impacts and affects the ways that we think, feel, and act. But mental health helps really determine how we handle stress, relate to others, and make choices. In that, we really want to look at, the 6 aspects of well-being. And there are many, actually, different models of well-being. And I like the 6 aspects of well-being, which are, emotional, occupational, physical, social, intellectual, and spiritual. So really mental health encompasses more than just the mental, because it is social. And it's about, about our feelings and about our emotions.
So why is workplace well-being so important?
Well, we think about the workplace, and of course, I'm coming from an employee assistance perspective where our focus, is first and foremost on the well-being of a work organization. And the members that make up the work organization, are our people. And you can't have a prosperous work organization, because we work to make money, right? You cannot really have a prosperous work organization if your employees are struggling with emotional and mental health issues. So for the workplace to actually be aware of when an employee may be struggling and be able to offer resources is so very important. In the EAP world, or at least at First Sun EAP, we talk a lot about workplace behavioral risk. And that may constitute someone with substance use issues, or it may be somebody with an anxiety disorder, or having anxious issues where they're just not focused on their job. And when we're not focused on our job, we're not being productive. And in that, we actually can be a liability to the work organization. So for a work organization to really understand and know the resources to get an employee the assistance they need is so very important, so that work organization can reduce the risk and liability that come with, as we say, people problems at work.
Well, we certainly know that this past year has, with COVID-19, has put on some additional stressors to folks. Can you talk a little bit about how this footprint of the pandemic is more about mental health than physical health?
Yes, it really is, because, we have been focused a lot on our physical health with the pandemic. But in that, we have had to do a lot of adjusting. We've had to deal with new and existing stressors. So many people have had to go work from home and been able to adjust to that, and having their children at home or their animals at home and trying to work, and so many other things. But in that, We've also experienced a lot of loss. And when we think about our mental health, so to speak, or our emotional well-being, we think about how do we adjust to change and how do we adjust to the things that get thrown our way. So let's just talk for a minute about stress, because being stressed does not necessarily constitute being mentally unwell, but it can lead to that. But when you think about stress, what happens? We are presented with some kind of a threat. And that threat may be something as small as the technology doesn't work when we're trying to get on a Zoom meeting, or we have too many emails to answer, or the phone's ringing, or we're trying to work with our children doing their school lessons, and we've got our boss trying to have us to do, lots of different things. But when we are stressed, what happens is our bodies react by our adrenaline system kicking in. And when we're under a lot of stress and a lot of trauma, because that's the other thing, we've lived in a 14-month crisis. And our systems are not accustomed to having to live to that crisis. So when you think about the fact that we've been living in this and the stress that takes place, that can lead to, say, mental unwellness. And that's one of the reasons, we're going to be seeing that for so long to come, even when the pandemic itself is no longer a health concern. But if you want to think about the continuum of mental health, I'm going to talk for just a minute about that, because you can think about a person who may even be diagnosed with depression or an anxiety disorder or schizophrenia or substance use disorder, versus someone who's just having trouble coping. But if you look at a continuum from somebody being in crisis to someone really excelling or being in flow, we ebb and flow through that, every day. But someone who is in crisis may actually be diagnosed with a mental illness. They may be very anxious, very low mood. They may have very poor sleep. They may be very anxious. And so that's somebody that is in crisis versus somebody that is struggling, which is the next level, which may have, again, some of that, they're tired. And then you have someone who's surviving, which is kind of being more irritable or sad or worried, or distracted or withdrawn. And that's really where we need to take notice, because that is the area where people typically we begin to see that and say, okay, they're going to get better. But when they start moving to that struggling and crisis, we need to try to get them the help. And it may just be them being aware of what's going on in their own life. And then, of course, we have the other end of the continuum, which is thriving and excelling, which is high energy and happy, normal social activity. But we do ebb and flow through that. And even someone who has been diagnosed with a mental illness, they are not that mental illness. I think so often in society, we want to categorize somebody by, they're anxious or they're depressed. But do we say they're they have their diabetes or their heart disease? They have that. That's not who they are. And just like physical health problems can be managed, so can mental health problems.
So how should an employer respond to or address an employee's well-being, whether it's the employee who brings it to their attention or as a supervisor, they notice a change in their employee's behavior?
Well, thank you, Liz, because one of the first things you can do is take notice, especially in this time, this pandemic. We are disconnected in so many ways. But as an employer or manager, you have to be aware when someone's performance is changing. You may be aware of the fact that they're pulling away from somebody, pulling away from their coworkers, pulling away. They're not getting their job duties done. They may be, just more irritable or having more conflict with coworkers. they may not be showing up for work, or they may be doing what we call, presenteeism, which is they're showing up for work, but they're really not there. They may be on their phone. They may just be distracted. They just, but you notice, again, think about this as a red flag. When there's a change in behavior, someone does not seem to be themselves. And how can you approach them? By just checking in. As an employer, you don't have to know, and you don't need to know what all is going on in someone's personal life. But what you do need to know is that they're able to do their job and that you can hold them accountable for getting their job done. But if you notice there's something not right, so to speak, or there's a change in performance, being able to approach them in a caring, compassionate, empathetic way, and just to say, hey, I'm noticing there's something doesn't seem right. You just don't seem to be yourself. Is there a way that I can help you? Again, you don't say, can you tell me what's going on? But just to be able to say, I'm concerned about you. And I would like to be able to offer resources or help you get the help that you need. Now, very often employees may do like what I want to say is the fishing hook, and tell you everything that's going on in their personal life so that you won't hold them accountable. But the important thing about the workplace is that you do hold people accountable for their jobs, but that you have the compassion and empathy to help them through those tough times in life, because we all experience them.
Mhm. So I hate to keep bringing up the pandemic, but we all know that has been first and foremost this past year. So I know you said that, employers can notice these changes in behaviors, and this can be another topic on its own. But with there being a lot more people in the remote workforce working from home, do you have any tips for how employers could possibly recognize warning signs or changes in their employees' well-being, seeing that a lot of folks are still working remotely? I think it would be easier to notice those changes if you're seeing them every day versus virtual environment.
Well, exactly. And that's why employers really do have to look for some of those signs. If you're on a Zoom meeting, so to speak, and somebody never wants to put their camera on, or they're late for that, or they're not turning in assignments, or they don't feel like they're doing that, or even what their language sounds like. You can tell so much about a person by their tone of voice and their physical appearance. You can look in someone's eyes, and if their eyes just seem to be distant, far away, you can tell that something's just not right. And just being able to say, this is what I'm seeing in you. Um, we're really looking, to be able to say, I see you, and I care. You know, that is the greatest thing we can do for someone's mental health, is to be able to connect with them and see them, um, and see that the pain is there if they're really struggling, um, in that way.
Thank you. I do have a few more questions, but I do want to encourage the folks on the call, if you have questions or resources that you would like to share with the rest of the group, please put those in the chat box. So now we've covered a little bit of the employer side. I just want to switch gears a little bit and address the importance of employees and how they can be more vocal about their mental well-being with their employers.
Good. Yes. I mean, I think that's very important, because as individuals, as employees, we have to ask for what we need, um, and to be able to say, I'm not managing things well. What can we do differently? How can I take this off my plate? Can I work maybe a different kind of flexible schedule? We don't hesitate to go to our employer to take time off work. Not that I encourage people not working, but if we have a headache or a backache or a stomach ache, or we've got a broken leg or a broken arm, we're going to be very quick to be able to say, I can't work right now because of this. But in the same way, we can say, I'm really struggling. I'm getting help, but I also, this is what I need from my work environment. And to ask for what you need. And that may just be support. And it may be to go to coworkers and say, hey, I'm struggling. Can you help? Can you just, just support me? And then maybe that's just kind of being present and holding space for somebody. Or if you're coming from a spiritual sense, praying. Um, but just to be able to be there, to listen, but for folks to be able to say, this is what I need, or do we have an employee assistance program if that employee is not aware? To be able to ask and say, do we have an EAP? What is that number? Again, your employer doesn't have to know what's going on with you, but an employee assistance program can provide many resources. It's not just about counseling. Perhaps you're struggling with, you've got your mother-in-law who is really deteriorating because of the pandemic and may need services, may need older adult services, or may need to be going into some kind of a retirement situation, assisted living or nursing home, and you're struggling with that. The employee assistance program can help with that. Financial stress, especially in this pandemic, has risen, and we're seeing that more and more. To be able to say, I need some help here. Do we have some financial wellness resources?
Thank you. I know, so it's very important for folks to be knowledgeable of the mental health resources that are available to their team members within their company. I do know that some insurances also have the virtual doctor's visits, and now they're not just limited to physical ailments. They also have, therapists and folks like that people can talk to as well. I do want to point everyone to the chat. We have some folks that are sharing some additional resources for some events that are coming up as well. Folks can get certified in mental health first aid, which I think is interesting. So I look forward to learning more about that. So just continue to share, and if you have any questions. Lucy, I know that you do have some healthy coping solutions that folks can implement to strengthen their well-being. Would you be willing to share some of those with us?
Yeah, so let me just talk for a minute about kind of go back to the whole well-being, because what we look at in terms of well-being, we look at the 6 aspects of well-being. It's good just to kind of do a self-measurement. And good mental health means that we are self-aware. We are aware when we are, when we're not feeling our best intellectually even, or spiritually or socially. But it seems so much that with, with well-being, as we do check in with ourselves and we see that we're really beginning, to struggle, that we're having, say, more bad days than good days, or we really just don't want to get out of bed, or we're eating too much, or sleeping too much, or drinking too much, that we begin to look at, what's going on in our lives, to be aware of all the things that have happened. And so often, self-care is about saying, okay, I've got, this stressor going on, this stressor going on, this stressor going on, this stressor going on. Yeah, okay, that makes a lot of sense. Then what do I need to do for myself? As we look at, we think about going back to flying, one of the first things that we hear about when we get on a flight is, in the event of emergency, put your oxygen mask on yourself first, before you seek to put it on anybody else, even your child, because you're not able to help them unless you're breathing yourself. Well, in the same way, self-care is so very important, because, so many ways, you think about it, our gas tanks are empty and we keep trying to run on fumes. And if we don't fill that gas tank back up, we can't keep going. So when we count the stressors that are there in our lives and we say, okay, yes, I'm aware of this. What do I need to do to help myself so that I can keep helping everybody else? And be able to find those coping skills that best meet your needs. It may be going to play a round of golf, or going to get a pedicure or manicure, or a massage. So something simple like that. But it is about self-care. And, but so often we need to find, just a few minutes a day that we focus on ourselves. And whether it be for meditation or for exercise, one of the things that we are learning is that exercise and things like laughter actually can be so much more effective than even medication, because that helps release some of the toxins that our adrenal systems put out. Because when we were stressed and when we're having lots of things going on in our lives that keep going, we're dumping cortisol. So we have to find a way to release that. So in the same way that we have to fill up our gas tank, we have to find a way to kind of release things in a different way. So think of it, I'm in a car analogies today, but think of it about as healthy, clean emissions. We've got to emit things as we keep going that are healthy. So it's about keeping ourselves healthy, but not to beat ourselves up when we're not. So those days when we're not feeling so great, to be aware of what is going on, and kind of practice self-compassion, which, as we finish up today, I'm going to do a meditation on that.
Wonderful. Well, we do have a quick question in the chat box. It says, how can you tell the difference between a bad day or a bad week versus chronic anxiety and depression?
Great question, because we do have bad days, bad weeks. And again, we have to look at the situations, what's going on and how are we coping with what is going on versus, okay, I haven't been able to get out of bed for 2 weeks, or I'm crying for 2 weeks and I have no reason why. To be able to say, there's really, not real sure what's happening here, but this is what's going on, then it's time to look at that. If you can really point to situations, and even situations can create, prolonged grief, prolonged sadness can turn into depression or anxiety where you really aren't able to cope at all. So let's say, and I think, we're seeing that the pandemic has created so many more, anxiety disorders, which I don't really like that word disorder, but ways of coping, because heart's beating fast, our minds are going constantly. We're waking up in the middle of the night with like the hamster on the wheel. That's when you need to stop and say, okay, I think it's time for me to get some help. I'm not able to do this myself. And whether that be getting medication, which I, as a therapist, I want people to find more self-help ways to deal with things than have to the medication be the instant answer. Because medication is it's a supplement in so many ways. It's not the end all and be all to help people feel better. The self-care, self-awareness, self-growth is how we move from being in crisis to excelling. And we're finding those things that put us in what we call state of flow. I want to tell you just a minute about flow, because this is what we really want to strive for. And I'm maybe getting off topic a little bit, but I'm kind of coming back around because, again, when you look at that continuum from being in crisis to, every day is a bad day for 2 and 3 weeks versus, this is where I want to be. How am I going to get there? But that state of flow is really about just having, where your mind is, you're not so focused on what you're doing or what's going on, to you're just kind of in that, you're going about your day-to-day activities, or you're finding something that you're so passionate about that's all where you are. So you're, let's say that runner's high and you just kind of get caught up in that. Maybe you're knitting, maybe you're crocheting, maybe you're reading, but all these other things are not on your mind. But when we do have things that are constantly weighing on us, and especially we're not functional, then we have to say, okay, time out. What do I have to do for me? And, therapy, of course, is one of the best ways for someone to get what they need, because, studies show that the more you can actually talk about what's going on, the better you're going to be. But therapy is also about doing, and it's about having activities to be able to help you to look at where your mind is and what's going on and how you are thinking about things. So, one method of therapy, and that's one of the things that a lot of people are talking about now, is cognitive behavioral therapy. So there are lots and lots of apps out there to help people with their anxiety or depression. And most of them are based on a cognitive behavioral therapy model, which basically says that, your thoughts, the way you think about something really influences how you feel. So our thoughts precede our feelings lead to our behaviors. So if we can kind of change those thoughts, then we change the feelings and we change the behaviors. But it is cyclical in so many ways, because we have to look at our behavior. So let's say someone who is really struggling with those more sad days than happy, and they're could very well be depressed. But the way that they're showing that depression is they're irritable, they're getting angry. They may even do something like throw something or put their fist through a wall. And all you see is that anger. But what's really behind the anger? That is the behavior. It's not the emotion. So we have to get to what is that person thinking. And it may even not even be a conscious thought. It may be a subconscious thought, because we have these tapes that run through our heads that get stuck sometimes. And as those tapes get stuck, we begin to believe the things that we tell ourselves. And those a lot of times aren't true. So we change those tapes, we change those thoughts, and find more positive ways to do that. And in doing that, that's where we change those behaviors.
Thank you. And I know speaking with therapists is a judgment-free
Yes.
zone in that regard. So a lot of times it's easier to talk to someone when you don't feel like you're being judged. So a question here, how can an employer support employees with checking in on them? And what programs can an employer provide for them?
Well, of course, I'm an EAP addict, so to speak. I've been working in EAP for almost 30 years, employee assistance programs. And I think that, from an employer standpoint, is one of the best things you can provide an employee. But just to be able to know what are resources there. But again, it's about relationships and it's about caring. So whether it's just a quick note, say, hey, just want to check on you today, or just being able to say, even with all this technology, if folks are using Zoom or Teams, especially if Teams, you can just kind of do a video call right away, and just say, hey, just want to say hi, just want to check on you. I don't need anything, but just beginning to change that culture, so it's a culture of caring, versus a culture of always having expectations, and every time the boss calls, every time the manager calls, they want something else from you. But to be able to say, what, I care about you, and just want to make sure you're okay, and if you need anything.
Well, I also want to say that I took a course on the 5 leadership skills, and one of those was encouraging the heart. And it was about taking care of those around you. So that's also an important characteristic of leaders.
Yes.
So there are some great resources that have been shared in the chat. Thank you, Susan and Megan. They have programs, it appears, that works with most commercial insurance companies and EAP programs. So please be sure to check those out. And if there are no additional questions, Lucy, I think as a final takeaway, you were going to lead us this morning in a short meditation.
Well, I want to do a couple more things before I do the meditation.
Okay.
I want to talk a little more about self-care. If I can keep, if you'll indulge me just to kind of keep talking a few minutes.
Absolutely.
As I kind of keep going, and I'll go down a rabbit hole real fast. But but I want to think about just a couple of self-care exercises that you can do, but you can also take back. One of the best things that we can do for ourselves is get vitamin D, sunshine. And especially when these days, that are nice kind of spring days. We haven't gone from winter to summer this year. We've actually had a little bit of a spring. So I think it's going to be like 72 today. But just being able to go outside for a little while. But especially with anxiety, one of the best things we can do is ground ourselves. And I like to tell people, take that literally. Go outside, put your feet in the ground. So take your shoes off, go stand in the grass or the dirt or whatever. But then stop and look around you and think about your senses. What do you see? And just to be aware. What do you hear? What can you feel? Can you pick up a leaf? Can you pick up a acorn or all these prickly things in my yard? But what can you feel? What can you taste? It might taste pollen out there, but even so, maybe you take a cup of coffee and sit outside. Do you taste that coffee? So you're engaging your senses. So you're seeing, you're hearing, you're touching, you're tasting. But what do you smell? Sometimes you can do this kind of a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. But I just like to think about the 5 senses and using those senses that ground you. And how can you begin to be able to be grounded and be where you are? That is about mindfulness. It's being aware of where you are in the moment. A second thing that you can do, and of course there's lots and lots of studies out there that talk about gratitude and how gratitude really does change our brains. So to stop for a minute and just to say, today I am grateful for, and if you name 1 thing or 2 things or 3 things, but if you begin to make that a practice, and just to be able to say, I am grateful for the sunshine. I am grateful to be here with you today. I'm grateful that I woke up to, a puppy snuggled up to me this morning, even when I woke up way too early. But what are you grateful for? And to be able to name that. And if you begin that exercise of even every day naming things that you're grateful for, but take it 1 step further. Go into, I want to be able to thank someone for what they have meant to me. And writing them a letter, handwriting, and in that just being able to say, I am grateful that you paid attention to me. What Maya Angelou says, we may forget what somebody did, but we'll never forget how they made us feel. Let someone know how they've made you feel. Thank them for that. That goes a long way to our being in that sense of flow and to helping ourselves. Again, we should not be defined by our emotions, even when they are in that crisis mode. But we should find ways that we can find healing for ourselves and find ways to help us feel better. So I want to move us to that meditation, but I want to see if there are any further questions before I do that.
I don't see any additional questions. Another great resource in the chat, though, says they offer counseling and therapy, but they work on based on household income, so they don't add additional stressors.
Emerge family therapy.
Yes.
Yes.
So no additional stressors based on affordability there. So please check out the resources in the chat box, but I don't see any further questions. So we'll see if you...
I'm going to play with technology for a minute to make sure I can get this my screen share going. Somewhere or not. So, okay. So I'm going to I want to walk us through a mindfulness meditation to kind of close today. And the reason I want to do this is because, again, research is showing that the more mindful we are, the more we are able to kind of fill up that gas tank, because it's about stopping and being aware. It's about grounding. It's about finding that anchor. So I want to walk us through a meditation called RAIN. And I'll have to say, I am not a trained meditation teacher. I'm someone who is trying to practice some mindfulness meditation. There are a lot of really good meditation teachers out there, as well as apps. But Tara Brock is someone that I have just really come to admire. And she is the one who has done this meditation of RAIN. And it's really a practice of radical compassion. So as I walk you through this, I'm going to start just kind of a brief musical or sound interlude. So the acronym RAIN is easy to remember because it's about bringing mindfulness and compassion to emotional difficulty. So you're recognizing what's going on, you're allowing the experience to be there just as it is. You're investigating with interest and care, and you're nurturing with self-compassion. So I just want to ask you to lightly close your eyes and to take a deep breath in through your nose, and then just breathe out lightly through your mouth, and take several deep breaths. But focus on your breath as you're listening to my voice. Think about recognizing what is going on, consciously acknowledging in any given moment the thoughts, feelings, and behaviors that are affecting you. This can be done with a simple mental whisper, noting what you're most aware of. Maybe you're saying to yourself, I'm sad, I feel sad, I feel lonely, I feel happy. But recognizing and consciously acknowledging the thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. And then allowing that experience to be there just as it is. That means letting the thoughts, the emotions, the feelings or sensations that you have recognized simply be there without trying to fix or avoid anything. You might recognize fear and allow by mentally whispering, it's okay. This belongs. Yes. Allowing creates a pause that makes it possible to deepen attention. You're looking to deepen that attention, to allow it just to be there. You don't have to do anything with it. And then investigate. Investigate, call on your natural curiosity, the desire to know the truth, and direct a more focused attention to your present experience. You may ask yourself, what most wants attention? How am I experiencing this in my body? What am I believing? How does this vulnerable place want from me? What does it most need? Whatever the inquiry, your investigation will most be transformational if you step away from conceptualizing and bring your primary attention to the felt sense in the body. We call them feelings because we do feel them in our body. And then we nurture with self-compassion. Self-compassion begins to naturally arise in the moments that you recognize that you're suffering. It comes into fullness as you intentionally nurture your inner life with self-care. To do this, try to sense what the wounded, frightened, or hurting place inside you most needs. and then offer some gesture of active care that might address this need. Does it need a message of reassurance, of forgiveness, of companionship, of love? Experiment and see which intentional gesture of kindness most helps to comfort, soften, or open your heart. It might be the mental whisper, I'm here with you. I'm sorry, and I love you. I love you and I'm listening. It's not your fault. Trust in your goodness. You might even place your hand on your heart or your face, or be envisioned by being bathed or embraced by a warm, radiant light. If you find it difficult to offer yourself love, bring to mind a loving being, a spiritual figure, a family member, even a pet, and imagine that being's love and wisdom flowing into you. When you've completed these steps, it's important to notice the quality of your own presence and to rest in the wakeful, tender space of awareness. The fruit of rain is realizing that you're not identified with any limited sense of self. Give yourself the gift of becoming familiar with the truth and natural freedom of your being. And as you come back, just place your hands on your heart. Open your hands and your heart to yourself, just as you might to someone else, and lead yourself into knowing that you can come back here at any time to give yourself this self-compassion, this hope, this healing that is recognizing, allowing, investigating, and nurturing. So as we come to the end of our time together, are there any more questions? I thank you, Liz.
Any additional questions? Lucy, I just want to thank you so much for being with us today and sharing your time and expertise and experience with us. We so appreciate you. Also, I'd like to thank First Sun EAP for allowing you the time to be with us today. A recording will be shared on the Greenville Chamber's website and sent to attendees along with a survey. The survey is very important for us in creating future content for Community Matters webinars, so please share your feedback with us. Don't forget that this is part of an ongoing series. May is Mental Health Awareness Month, so please tune in on May the 25th as we continue our conversation around mental health with Dr. Uma Gupta of USC Upstate. We'll be talking about the power of embracing change personally and professionally from a neuroscience perspective. So let's all do our part to care for our community, and I hope you all have a wonderful week. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.